So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody, and welcome to this episode of What is the Point? As you know, this is about having discussions with mission-driven entrepreneurs. As a founder of Business Enjoyment, purpose is one of those things that I believe is very important to getting to that level of enjoyment. We need to deal with some other stuff as well, but purpose sits right at the heart of it. And for those of you who are interested in purpose and those sort of things, just a little note. Later this month, I am running a Your Purpose Challenge. It's completely free. 26th of September, every evening we'll do a little bit of a deep dive into certain areas, get you thinking about certain stuff to help find your own purpose. So if you're interested in that, click on the link, follow that yourpurposechallenge.com, get yourself booked on that, or send it to someone that you think would be interested in it. Anyway, that's enough from me on that. For now, we're going to bring Julia Harris on. Julia Harris is founder of Complex Strengths and the Neurodiverse universe. And we're going to find out about, quite frankly, what is the point of Julia? So if you please welcome to the stage, Julia Harris. Hello. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay, surprisingly. Thank you for inviting me on. It's really lovely to be here and all those shenanigans. What is the point? I was interesting of that. What is the point of Julia? That's quite a hefty thing. And already, what is the point?
That's sort of the underlying thing. I mean, if we put it into more specific context, what would you say your purpose is, your mission? What is it that you're here to do?
Well, so there's many layers, isn't it? And that's interestingly for me, my brain, and I've thought historically about having T-shirts printed that say you're missing the non-dimensional point, single-pointed consciousness, and everything is just quite sort of like. And there's so many layers to everything. The point of Complex Strengths in the Neurodiverse universe and the work that I do there is very much about changing the world. I mean, I imagine everybody that arrives here says that their purpose in reality is change the world in some way, be it for themselves or for other people. And predominantly, most of us who are in purpose-driven business, of course, are trying to reach other people. So we're trying to change the world for other people. For me, it's especially what drives me. So purpose is that double-edged sword, isn't it? It can be a wonderful thing to embrace your purpose and to have a sense of purpose and have a sense of value and belonging through your purpose. But also it can be, for many of us, a very driving instinct. So the thing that drives me, that keeps me awake at night, that makes it tough for me, is thinking about our young neurodivergent people growing up in a world that's still that is not accepting of them and gives them many negative messages about themselves. And that's my a very big emotional drive. And the big drive about that is because it makes no sense. It makes no sense for us as a culture. It makes no sense for us as a society. Not being neurodivergence positive means that we are losing out on huge amounts of intelligence and insight and rich human cultural diversity, because neurodivergent people tend to have even their own community cultures and things that are misunderstood and not really part of the mainstream. So there's all sorts of intelligence that is human intelligence is going to waste, and a lot of innovation that could perhaps be reached more easily if more of the voices were brought to the table. And if we hadn't, not that you'll tell in this conversation today, but if I hadn't grown up with very much the messages of be quiet, Julia, be quiet, shh, stop talking, stop chatting, which many neurodivergent young people, that's part of the neurotypical normative messages that we receive, is all about the things that are not so easy for us, and the things that are easier for us, and the amazing things that we can bring to the table are not really supported or made space for, or we're not given windows and mirrors about those strengths. Although that is, hopefully, that's sort of the neurodiversity paradigm, and a lot that you can see even on LinkedIn in workplaces and things like that, that is starting to shift. So it really is about, we need a cultural shift so that all parents and educators and young people are operating in a neurodivergence positive culture, in order to really gain the best outcomes for those individuals and for all of society.
So from your point of view, so you've grown up experiencing that, and the downside and the negativity of coming through a system which doesn't understand the complexities of neurodiversity. Is that what you're saying? That's why it's such a thing for you.
No, it's such a thing for me. I mean, me personally, yeah, but like, I'm half 100 years old. I'm on my way out. To be honest, what happened to me as a young person?
It's your drive. It is you, so it's important to you because of your background.
Yeah, it is my background, which gives me insight and understanding, and who I have been my entire life gives me an awful lot of. Okay, so I'm going to try not to swear. Trying to think alternative words. All the swearing that I normally do. It's not super professional, is it? But it's that sort of. But that's a neurotypical normative, concept as well. Do you know what I mean? But it's like, I've had that fight. I've had that attitude. I'm oppositional. I'm oppositional in my nature. Which for a girl received all sorts of messages. For boys, they got in trouble in their own way. I have had a life full of challenges, that the root of those challenges is a neurotypical normative society. That is very true. But that gives me insight, is not my bugbear. My bugbear that drives me is witnessing what is happening to our neurodivergent young people now. When we, I've worked in what would be, and I'm going to put inverted commas, challenging behaviors was my speciality through my work, working with adults or looked after children or elderly, or, I've worked across client groups, I've worked in residential, I've worked in daycare and educational settings. So I've worked in those kind of settings and came out of that when my youngest was young. So I've worked as a early years education provider and gone on to be an artist and children's entertainer as my self-employment. When I've come to go back into this kind of world, thinking, well, I have other experiences that I would like to make sure are being of functional use to people before I head off out of the planet. But it's when I went back into the work after nearly 15 years out of that line of business, out of that area of the profession, I was shocked. And I will say, I was horrified and shocked, and I really struggled seeing the kind of things we still are not embracing within even specialist education in the UK, certainly within the last 2 years, and certainly all the stories of the parents and people that are in the groups and those that I'm supporting. It's still very real experience. And the same for the teachers. The teachers are frustrated and wanting to be able to do more, and part of their teacher training is not really giving them, it gives them a hint of this is what's to come and then doesn't actually give them very much preparation, and everything is kind of segmented at the moment. So we do it by this diagnosis, this diagnosis, this diagnosis, whereas neurodivergence tends to have a lot of overlapping traits that we can be working to be much more inclusive of in our culture and in our classrooms. So that may have gone a bit sideways. My points normally do.
So give us some examples of some of the specific things you've seen where the children are being let down.
Okay, so I want to be specific yet general. So the kind in general in society, the specific kind of things that I'm seeing and that are a real struggle for our young people. So the neurodivergence currently, your life outcomes are, words that are popping into my head right now, are catastrophically, undeniably, unfairly, unjustly, but they are definitely worse life outcomes. So, for example, at my age with undefined neurodivergence and unsupported neurodivergence during my childhood, my life expectancy is about 12 years less having ADHD. Autistic life expectancy, life expectancy is like 39 years of age, which is just absolutely horrifying. And some of that is to do with where people will discuss or use terms such as profound autistic experience, which goes hand in hand with learning disabilities and perhaps physical disabilities as well. But actually, even when that's balanced out, the life outcomes are absolutely dire. We're overrepresented in the prison population. There's all sorts of drug misuse and poor health outcomes, inaccessibility for things. So there's the outcomes specifically already. That's general, but that's a specific thing. For in educational settings, specifically for our young people, is being where what I want to do is put the information into young people's hands as well as to teachers. One of the things that we look at is polyvagal theory, for example. So escalation of behaviors. So understanding communication. Communication package is another one. There's a freebie one on my website that looks at communication differences. So young people being escalated, and staff being escalated by young people's behavior that is misunderstood and they don't understand what the communication is about. And of course, teachers and educators are under an awful lot of pressure from other places. So it's being able to, so specifically young people are being failed in as far as just quite simply dyslexia, for example, is one of those things that we've known for 50 years plus. What dyslexia is. We've had methods of dealing with dyslexia. That's still not even a standard screening process in schools. There are still young people coming through school now who at 15, 16 are getting their identification of autistic or ADHD and things like that, having already just made it through the education system. So specifically, there are those there's off-rolling that happens when the placements break down in school. Children end up out of education. There's exclusion. Neurodiverse students are much more highly represented in the exclusion. So that's just, if you look at the figures, that's statistically discriminatory practice against disabled and neurodiverse young people. So there's lots of specifics about how they're being affected, even in the sort of general population. So rather than point to schools or point to individual families' experiences. But the impact on families is pretty catastrophic, especially and for women as well. So that to me is a sort of feminist type issue, because of course women hold a lot of that emotional labour as well as the supporting of the family. So the women's career are much more likely to be, the concept of, well, but by the time your child is 2, 3, 4, 5, you get to go back out to work and re-begin your career, even though you're the person who's given up those years. If you have neurodivergent young person, that's much more likely to be impacted. So your income is likely to be impacted. There's all sorts of huge impacts from the system not working at the moment. But we can point to, there's all sorts of neuroscience that gives us much deeper insight as to what's going on. We have neurodivergent adults being able to share and help translate what behaviors are likely to be experienced on the inside. And the things that, like with the communication differences, understanding that sensory differences in the environment, and for me, for example, my time processing is that of one moment in time. There are 2 areas in the brain in which we seat our consciousness in relation to time. And mine is seated in that everything is in this now moment. It affects the way that I communicate. It affects the way that I plan. It affects the way I value and prioritize things. And a young person is not being lazy, is not being resistant, it's once you begin to really understand and value that is a different human perspective. And there's reasons for it that are of benefit to mankind. Literally, we have Buddhist monks sitting on tops of mountains teaching people to meditate, to achieve seating their consciousness in this one moment in time. but there's like, you need to balance it with what we wish to achieve in life. But I very much am about helping young people achieve what they want to achieve, but giving everybody language to be able to communicate and identify from young ages, so that young people, if they grow up in a neurodivergence positive culture, then they're more likely to say, oh yeah, that's how I experience reality, as opposed to my youngest, who was 13 before they could even explain their sensory differences to me, because it never occurred to them that what they were experiencing was different to anybody else. So whereas if we develop this language, we can bridge some of these challenges that we have, and it's a much more positive way to develop personal resources, which is what we want to do. It's like we say, we want resilient young people. We don't develop resilient young people by pushing them through the existing paradigm and making them fit through repeatedly pushing them into the wrong shape hole. We develop resilience by finding out where they truly are, helping them find their own true resources, helping us identify what resources we have between us. And that is what creates relationship and access to internal resources that creates the resilience for mental health and moving forward as adults. And therefore, we will have a much more, rich and productive and, innovatively viable country moving forward.
Well, preferably, yeah. Looking at the people that sort of showed interest in this talk, and who we've got, I imagine we've got a range of different people across different areas. So I'm going to call out some sort of typical classes of people, and when I say that, let me know what information you would like them to know, or action that they can take.
Mm-hmm.
So if we just, someone watching this, listening to this, and they're new to the whole concept of neurodiversity, so they've heard of it, but they don't really know much about it. What would you want them to know? What would you want them to do?
Well, there's definitely Google. Google is your best friend. There's Nick Walker, Judy Singer. So those are two names I'll throw out there for if you wish to understand the historical rise of those terms of neurodiversity. Was coined by Judy Singer, and it was a way of starting the conversation that a lot of us are continuing to have. Nick Walker is another respected voice. They're American, she is American, and they point to neuroqueer. So again, it's but a lot of sharing about the differences in neurodivergent experiences and respecting and empowering that. There's lots of resources in the UK. There's in my site, there's I've got a frequently asked questions page, which has got a simple breakdown of a lot of the terms on that page. So I'll share that from my site. So that's on the neurodiverseuniverse.com or complex strengths of the neurodiverse universe. You can access the frequently asked questions, and that's got the some of the a breakdown of what the terms mean, and then just really be embracing the fact that this isn't there. We need to include all the special people. It's literally it's about through our neurotypical normative culture, we are wasting human intelligence and a great deal of human power, and that neurodivergent individuals, we have been, I do easy for some, easy for others in my training, which points to, for example, so the traits that are associated with school and the traditional workplace of executive functions that are praised in those situations. And if you don't have them, you're viewed as, you need to learn harder, try harder. It's a deficit you need to make up. Whereas if you have the neurodivergent strengths of innovative thinking, entrepreneurship, bravery with, to act in situations where you've got little information, there's all sorts of benefits of neurodivergent strengths, cognitive strengths. But if you don't have those, you're not in any way told, you're slow in developing that. You need to build that up. So it's about understanding that the shift is not about appeasing or making things fair for, people that are, have been marginalized. We have been made less important through those processes. So it's about really embracing and just leveling this playing field, because it's the most useful, powerful thing for all of us to do.
Beautiful. Thank you. What about there's someone watching who is in the education space, and may have a broad spectrum of people that they're educating. What would you like them to take away from this?
I would say, especially at this stage in the neurodiversity movement, we are transitioning from a lot of held wisdom and outdated truisms. Be aware of what is essentially confirmation bias. So during our training, anybody, when we're trained in something, what we read in print, what was said first, is what holds a really big weight in our confirmation bias system. And the voices that are out there now, there's a huge list of advocates in my network as well. So if you can find autistic voices, ADHD voices, and voices be spoken or not spoken, but go to the adults and the people who are already making their way through the system and surviving the system, and listen to those voices and take on board the things that they're saying. And there are groups on Facebook, for example. I have one which is called Ask an ADHD Adult. Not that we've been very active on there, but there's Ask an Autistic Adult. It's being able to have humility and maybe go to some of the adult versions of people that might be representing some of the young people that you're working with, rather than the external observed labels and things. There's so many books and research that is done, which are all done from a neurotypical normative viewpoint. I will very quickly mention, for example, one study that it was quoted as demonstrating the abnormality of autistic brains and thinking, because when given the opportunity in public to share money, give it to a charity or keep it for the self, in the whole group of people, both neurotypical or holistic and autistic, there was predominantly this move to put the money to charity rather than to self. When given the same opportunity to either keep the money in private, keep the money or give to charity, the rate in the neurotypical or holistic community raised greatly, those that chose to keep the money because it was private and nobody would know. And the autistic people continued to give the money to charity. And in that study, that was worded and used as a way to demonstrate the abnormality and the deficit that was present in an autistic brain. Now, if you think about literally just the weight of that concept, a lot of the bias within the studies and things and the news and the things that you read is absolutely very real and very present. So go to some of the sources instead, as well, and reach out and support that. And of course, I'm super happy to help support people as well.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay, and if there's someone listening who's a parent of a child that's neurodiverse, obviously some of what you've already said will be relevant, but what specifically should they be doing?
If you're a parent, again, please grab especially the communication, free communication resource, which I'll throw a link in a moment into the chat once I can focus on two things at once. Once you're talking, I'll put links in. I'll put a link in the chat. So about communication differences. So this is proven about across neurotypes. The confusion is about communication differences, but this is very much about sensory differences and sensory processing and understanding that in a society we live in as well, what I would call a childist society, in the way that children are minoritized. We have the word minor for children, and the word minor meaning less important, and and that you are surrounded by a culture that is giving you neurotypical normative pressures. A lot of that received wisdom that we have is not going to work with neurodivergent young people. And the reason it doesn't work with neurodivergent young people is it's not very healthy for neurotypical children either, in inverted commas. There are a lot of things that we've got a lot of, a real paradigm shift is what needs to happen. So it is literally all of our previous beliefs as we understand and explore neuroscience, and as we listen to neurodivergent voices, everything kind of gets turned on its head, and we begin to understand what is powerfully important and useful about these strengths that your children might be exhibiting. It's hard if you are surrounded by voices telling you should do it this way, you're making a wood for your own back, you're being soft on that. There's a lot of those voices that go on. So find other voices to help support you in exploring with your young person what their experience of reality is, and how to bring, and I don't see strengths as different from, people are always like weaknesses, balance it with strengths. Now I'm like, what people are calling weaknesses are probably your young person's strength. And if you find the right community that will understand you and supporting that parenting. So again, go to those voices if you can that are neurodivergent themselves.
Brilliant. And for those that are neurodivergent themselves, if they're listening, and I think we've probably got two categories. There may be some that just in that camp, and there's also, I know there's a lot of people interested in doing similar things to you in terms of spreading the word and changing things. So we'll get on to them in a minute. So if there's someone listening who is just neurodivergent themselves, maybe they are young, have facing challenges, maybe they've not really been exposed to what you've been talking about before, and it's sort of, oh gosh, there's a different way of being. What is it you want to get? Because you've talked about getting the stuff to these kids, to the young people themselves. What is it you want them to?
So for young people, the as well as neurodivergence, positivity and neurodiversity language, and talking about differences of experience, I want to the young people, especially who are growing up now, to have information about their brain and their neurology, understanding the interactions between human beings and what happens to our neurology, all that kind of stuff. For adults who are out there who are thinking, yeah, I never fitted in, or I never succeeded. Everybody told me, that I had strengths or I had intelligences that were supposed to go somewhere, and I never, I left school with minimal qualifications. I still have very few qualifications now. That's not to say that if you're neurodivergent you won't have qualifications. Many of us have several degrees because we do love learning. I've always loved learning, but I didn't end up with any qualifications, for example, or not to speak of. Is just understand that everywhere that you look, the diagnostic manuals, most of the information that's out there is looking at so for example, diagnostic criteria, which is basically trauma related, of what it is to be neurodivergent and try to succeed in the society and then not manage it, and the impacts that has on us physiologically reflected in our behaviors, is understand that a lot of the information that's out there that will attempt to define you or define what neurodivergence is still outside in. Again, find some community. We have neurokin communities on Facebook and places like that, and have patience with yourself and patience with everybody else. There are a lot of arguments about language. I don't identify as neurodivergent. I know probably my core difference is dyspraxia. My ADHD might be a core difference. It may be that my ADHD is the traumatic state my brain is in, having not fit in and not found those connections or been able to follow the usual path in development that was around me as a young person. So we don't yet know 100%. We don't know if ADHD is one group of people. There's a brilliant doctor, so I'm going to mention Dr. Helen Taylor, who has written a paper which is aimed at dyslexic, but mentions ADHD, and that is exploring us as we were nature's explorers. So therefore we have skills that are different to the normal workplace situation. And so I'd recommend reading her paper to give you a really, everything I've been saying for the last 2 years, she wrote out in a paper. So I feel like, yes, I'm not insane. It's wonderful. Also, somebody else I follow is Jeremy Andrew Davis, who I'd like to big up, who's doing posts at the moment about social model and medical model of disability, and really going into exploring that and looking at that. And they are autistic as well. So again, there are places to turn to. So just be discerning in where you find your supportive information.
Brilliant. Thank you. And then final category, as I alluded to it. So there's people who, many of whom I suspect, but are in a similar space in that they've identified their challenges and they're trying to help other people in that situation. Is there anything you'd like to say to those people?
Yeah, so one, just well done. I wish all my energy to you, because I know absolutely how exhausted you are in your life, as well as the exhausting conversations that we're having, and the fact that we are, as a minoritized group, doing that work much. Like I shared a post earlier today, the people who are doing the work against racial discrimination or any other forms of discrimination, the people who are absolutely bearing the burden of the impacts of discrimination are the ones that are having to turn up and do the work and be available for research and be available for talks and all that kind of things in order to help change the world. So one, my absolute heart and support to everybody that's out in the space working to change the world for all our young people, whatever, and to try and prevent whatever discriminations and normative cultures would besiege them if and in the places that we don't do that work. I would also acknowledge that, again, as I mentioned, a lot of us come with our own biases and our own ways of interpreting things. It's not worth us losing time in arguing over our different perspectives on things. But just like we want other people to be curious with us, be curious with each other and curious with our stories. I know, and Andrew, you know me quite well. My brain's a bit wild and a bit out there. And I definitely, I like to challenge things really, really right the way down to the core, like the patriarchy and the neurotypical normative. And so you may be out there saying things that I may sound like I'm being more dismissive to. So you might be running a support group for autistic parents, and your wording might be wording that I would not choose to use, for example. So you may choose to term things in as far as life is tough and we need to support each other and things like that. I would like to say that I respect the work that you are doing still and the language that you are achieving and that you are using if you are helping those young people. Whatever way it is, I think we need to make space for each other, as well as to safely, and this is the culture of safe misunderstanding, which I would push for in my communication things as well. It's okay for us all to be at different points in our journey, and to still stay open to that conversation and to really help work with each other, really uncover what is the most empowering thing for all of society, and especially our neurodivergent young people.
Brilliant, thank you. So what I'm going to do, that's great. What I'm going to pop up. Do you want to go? You said you had some links you wanted to go and find.
Okay, I'll try and do that now.
I'll do some talking for a bit. So what I'm going to do is I've got LinkedIn open on a different page. I'm just trying to see if I can see any. If you've got any, if anyone's watching or listening at them, whoever is listening, you've got any questions you want to ask. See if you can put them into a comments box, or and I'll see what happens. I don't know. I've never tried it before. I've never got that to happen work before. But if you do have any questions, I'll see if I can pick them up and pass them across. But at the moment, I'm not sure where they're coming from. So there we go. In theory, they're meant to come up on my screen, but let's have a look. Let's see. So if you've got any questions, oh, we've got people not getting on, so that's good. So some people have failed to access and things. So there we are.
And also, it's not. I can't work out. I'm clicking everywhere and it's not letting me type. So what I will do is when you share this video, I will put links underneath to things. I'm making available this month quite a good introductory breakdown of making a play for neurodivergence positive culture, which explains some of the things and some of my thinking in there as well, which is usually a resource that I make available in schools and things like that. So that I've put out for completely half price, which takes it down to like 10 quid for half an hour's worth of videos and bits of information and things. And I'll put some links and things underneath where you share this, because I can't work out how to do this either.
Yeah, okay, no problem. We'll get that sorted. Is there any final sort of things you want to share in terms of what you're up to, or anything else you want to get across to other people? I don't think, just to bring things to a close.
Yeah, no, I think I probably rambled over most of the things that I would have covered. It's just understanding absolutely that whatever is going on, whether it's learning, in our relationships, in our health, these are neurological and physiological processes. Our behavior, that's neurological and physiological. And when we start, it's like in schools, I would love for it to be on the curriculum to have to learn about your brain. I know that's like, although they're bringing in leans, which is brilliant. I recommend leans as well for those schools that are safe enough to start these conversations at primary age about neurodiversity. The stuff that I design is for children right from the get-go, so that the language is there just in their toys and their games from the beginning. But yeah, it's definitely that one of the academy groups I work with have put it into their behavior policy. So if you're in those kind of fields, don't necessarily wait for it all to come to you. What the post I shared earlier is about, there's lots of conversation. We want to see actions, lots of little actions. Every little action is going to take us towards this future. There's lots of innovative thinking about how to reach that future. Take the little actions alongside us. Use the games, put things into your behavior policies, have the conversations, and be open to talking about these things all the time. Action, action, actions. That's what we want to see.
Brilliant. Thank you, Julia. Thank you so much for coming on and just giving a very brief intro into a number of different things in different areas. But as I say, if we'll get those links and everything, and we'll stick them in the comments of all stuff. So anything that you've got to share, people can have a look at. Obviously, have a look at Julia on LinkedIn, and your website will be in there on the links we'll put in, of course, so you can have a look at some of the resources you've got there. And hope we'll get the message spread further and wider. Yeah. Thank you very much for coming on. I'll let you disappear.
I don't know how to do that, so I'll let you do that.
You sit there. I'll sort that bit out. You sit there, and I'll be back with you in a minute. So yes, thank you very much, everybody. And I know some of you may have had difficulty getting on, but this will be posted be able to catch the replay. So hopefully you'll get the info from there. I'm back next week with Lisa Schermerhorn, who's a mindset coach, and she's certified by the Why Institute, which is part of the Simon Sinek Find Your Whys work. And we'll be talking about that, as well as the lies that exist behind every belief. So yeah, have a look at that and come along next week. So that's it from me, and wish you the rest of best for the rest of the evening and the rest of the day. My name is Andrew Miller from Business Enjoyment, and I want you to enjoy your business so much